All right, I'm still trying to figure out if yesterday I was in an airport or a comedy sketch. So I'm standing in TSA pre-check last night, right? A woman in the regular line starts panicking because I guess she forgot her ID. Now in my head, I'm like, well, that's it for you. Going back to the house. Time to step out of line, make a phone call, phone a friend, whatever, right? You would think so. Wrong. TSA dude looks at her, pauses, asks for her passport. She ain't got that either. And this badge wearing man, rule enforcing national security guarding individual hits her with a smile. Like, oh, there it is. Here it comes. Go ahead. Okay, where's Ashton Kutcher at? Because ain't no way we just turned TSA into Trust and Services of America. She goes off. No ID, no nothing. Because she didn't want to miss her plane. And here's the part that fries my brain. Y'all know one of the creators I was just down there with, Barbie. Her plane has somebody's bag beeping on there for like 10 minutes. They start pulling bags down, like whose bag is this, whose bag is this. They figure out whose bag it was. Turns out it was like some kind of like a CO2 monitor or something like that, right? I guess those things beep. But you're not thinking that when you're on a plane, right, at 30,000 feet. You got families on there crying, people like freaking out. Plane lands, boom, police sweep the entire aircraft. But on my end, we just letting individuals through without zero identification, like it's a family barbecue. You brought the plus one that nobody even knows. Make it make sense. I don't even want to hear there's the procedures line. Yeah, this wasn't that. I know there's procedures lines. I know there's secondary screening verifications, pat downs. Cool. Do that then. Because what I saw was not procedure. That was she looked good. Maybe she'll give me some later. Go ahead. That's what that was. Call it what it is. And let's talk about this ID thing real quick too, because y'all love bringing that. You need an ID for everything. You can't even pick up an Amazon package without ID. But getting on a metal tube at 30,000 feet with hundreds of people? No, you good, walk it off. Miss me with that. And before any of y'all say, well, why didn't you report it? No, I'm not reporting it. Because in Washington need to stop and pay these people. Pay them what they're worth. Because right now, y'all got out here over it. And clearly starting to get lazy. When security gets lazy, that is not a small problem. That's when it goes left. But let's be clear at the same time, low pay does not excuse low standards. You still got a job to do. And your job ain't flirting, it ain't vibing, it ain't making judgment calls based on who you think is cute. She still ain't giving you no, bro. Your job is to follow the rules. No ID, no fly. There's the procedure line. Because at the end of the day, one person's mistake shouldn't become everybody's risk. Full sentence.
It's chaos, it's insanity.
I think the lawmakers need to think about who they are representing and who they're taking care of.
It's been overwhelming, to say the least.
I feel that my safety is put at risk and the safety of all others that are flying.
What's up, family? So I appreciate you guys for watching this video. And listen, we got to talk because things are getting out of control in a way that should concern every single American. And I'm not exaggerating when I say this on the kind of stuff that starts to erode basic trust in our institutions. And we're talking about air travel, something millions of Americans rely on every single day. And right now, people are genuinely starting to question whether it's even safe. Why? Because when you got TSA agents not getting paid, not showing up to work, cutting corners, and in some cases, even breaking the rules or engaging in misconduct on the job, that's not just a minor inconvenience. That's a national security issue. That's the front line of our aviation safety system. And when that system starts to crack, people notice, people feel it. And let's be honest, there's already enough anxiety around flying as it is. And the last thing Americans need is to wonder whether the person responsible for screening passengers is actually doing their job or just going through the motions because they're frustrated, unpaid, or completely disengaged. And here's where it gets even more frustrating. While all of this chaos is happening on the ground and while regular Americans are dealing with delays, safety concerns, and uncertainty, you got politicians in Washington, D.C. who are still collecting their paychecks like nothing's wrong. So let that sink in for a minute. The very people who are responsible for keeping the government running, for making sure essential services are funded, are completely insulated from the consequences of their own dysfunction. And they're not missing meals. They're not wondering how they're going to pay their bills. They're not the ones standing in the security line wondering if the system is even functioning properly. And yet they are the ones playing political games with funding, pushing narratives, and trying to score points instead of actually solving problems. Now you also got this narrative being pushed about agencies like ICE. And it's intentionally misleading because people out here acting like ICE is on the chopping block, like it's about to be defunded overnight, when in reality, ICE is already funded through 2029. The shutdown isn't affecting ICE right now. What it's affecting are a multitude of other departments under the Homeland Security Department as a whole that everyday Americans rely on. But instead of being honest about that, instead of focusing on the real impact, certain politicians would rather spin the situations to fit their agenda. And that's the problem. It's not just incompetence, it's willful misrepresentation. See, the Department of Homeland Security isn't just ICE, right? You got the Coast Guard, you got TSA, you got FEMA in case of any disaster type of emergency fund to take place. So ICE is funded through 2029, but what about the rest of the departments within the whole umbrella of the Department of Homeland Security, which is the concern here? And as we see, and heavily being impacted is TSA. And at some point, we got to call it what it is. This is reckless. This is what happens when leadership prioritizes political theater over actual governance. And this is what happens when you got people in power who are more focused on pushing ideological agendas than making sure the country is functioning properly. And I'm telling you right now, the American people are the ones paying the price for it. Whether it's longer lines at the airport, reduced security, or just a general feeling that things aren't as tight as they should be, this is not normal. And it shouldn't be accepted as normal. So what do we do about it? Because sitting around and complaining isn't enough. And this is where accountability comes in. This is where the American people have to step up and actually make their voices heard. You got to call your senators. You got to call your representatives. You got to let them know that you are not okay with this, that you are paying attention, that you expect them to do their jobs and represent you, not their party, not their donors, not their political ambitions, but you. Because at the end of the day, they work for us, the American people, as they take public office. And if they're not doing a job, they need to feel that pressure. So we got a lot to get into today because the situation is deeper than what we're hearing on the surface. And there are also some serious implications that we need to talk about. So stick with me on this, hit the like button, share the video, subscribe to the channel, and I want you guys to check this out.
Quote, if the radical left Democrats don't immediately sign an agreement to let our country, in particular our airports, be free and safe again, I will move our brilliant and patriotic ICE agents to the airports where they will do security like no one has ever seen before, including the immediate arrest of all illegal immigrants who have come into our country, with heavy emphasis on those from Somalia who have totally destroyed, with the approval of a corrupt governor, attorney general, and Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, the once great state of Minnesota. I look forward to seeing ICE in action at our airports. Make America great again. And that comes, as we know, ICE is fully funded for a few years. So he does have the power to do this. And I guess the question remains, does Chuck Schumer continue this and President Trump make good on that promise he just put out on Truth Social?
And I want to see action at this point. I really do, because what we're watching right now is a failure to adapt in real time. If TSA is falling apart because people aren't getting paid, then we need to start thinking outside the box instead of just letting the system crumble. I want to see ICE agents at the airport stepping in and doing TSA's job temporarily until the situation gets resolved. And before people get emotional about that, let's be clear about what that actually means. We're talking about federal law enforcement officers, trained, vetted, already operating under federal authority, people who are more than capable of maintaining order and security. And if the issue is that TSA agents aren't showing up or aren't performing because of a funding crisis, then you don't just throw your hands up and say, oh, well. You use the resources you already have to make sure Americans are protected. And that's what competent leadership looks like. And right now, we are not seeing that. And then on top of that, you got Elon Musk stepping in and saying he's willing to pay TSA agents out of his own pocket just to keep things running. And think about how crazy that is for a second. One of the wealthiest people on the planet is looking at the federal government and basically saying, I can solve this problem faster than you can. Whether you like Elon Musk or not is irrelevant, because the real issue is what happens next. And the response from Democrats is outrage, criticism, and political attacks. Not because the idea wouldn't help, not because it wouldn't stabilize airport security, but because they don't control it. And that tells you everything you need to know. The problem isn't money itself. The problem is control over the money. They want your money, and more importantly, they want to control how it's distributed, because that's where the power comes from. When someone steps outside of that system and offers a direct solution, it disrupts that control and suddenly it becomes unacceptable, even if it benefits the American people. And that's why instead of working toward a solution, you see more division, more politicalization, and more finger pointing, while regular Americans are the ones stuck dealing with the consequences of a system that clearly isn't functioning the way it should.
ICE is still going to be funded for the next 3 or 4 years because of appropriations we put in on one big beautiful bill. What it does shut down is FEMA. It shuts down Secret Service. It shuts down TSA, and it shuts down our Coast Guard. And so we're trying to get an impasse. President Trump has come out and said, listen, I'll work with Chuck Schumer. I'll work with the Democrats. I'll do what we can. But what the likely path is, Martha, is we'll probably end up having to spin off the 5 bills, which will fund roughly 96, 97% of the government. And then we're trying to do at least a short-term CR for 2 to 4 weeks, possibly. We've asked for actually 6 weeks, and try to work out their differences here.
Yeah, this is bad, really. People really need to sit down and think about what's actually happening here instead of just repeating headlines. The government is shut down right now, and somehow the narrative being pushed is all about ICE. But here's the reality: the shutdown isn't even impacting, like I said, immigration and customs enforcement the way people are claiming. ICE is already funded for the remainder of President Trump's administration. And it was smart for President Trump to get ahead of it because we already know they was going to put him through hoops and hurdles, because the Democrats don't seem to think that national security is important, as you guys can see with illegal immigrants coming into the country during the Biden administration. But also on top of that, now you see that not only is this the first time, but the second time that the Democrat Party has used TSA as pawns in regards to continue to um use them as a way to have a political talking point to attack Republicans, but not really caring about the national security of the United States as a whole, let alone the American people, aka American taxpayer, right? And aka legal immigrant who came in here the right way. Because remember the first time the government shut down due to them holding SNAP benefits or SNAP beneficiaries, aka food stamp holders, hostage as well, leading them to be hungry and leading them to starve to make a point, right? They did that the first time, and the Democrats ended up bending anyway. So they did all that for nothing because they didn't want to fund SNAP, which hurt Americans who really needed the temporary help. And now you're seeing it on a national security standpoint, because when the government was shut down, TSA aviation was affected the first time, right? And then the second time, aviation, in this case, security, when it comes to TSA, is shut down again. So the first time was because of the budget, right? The Democrats wanted to continue to fund Medicare, Obamacare, which was helping illegals, and now they're basically holding the government hostage again, while TSA is used as pawns for a second time to uphold national security for the safety of American citizens, let alone citizens flying to wherever they're going, because they want to basically prioritize illegals. Because that means illegals and criminals can run the airports rampant, right? And if you have TSA workers basically leaving off the job because they can't take it any longer without having a paycheck to pay their bills, which is sad, then that leads for crime to run rampant in the airports and individuals to get on board or I should say, get onto planes, God forbid, that they shouldn't be on, right? Because now you're interrupting the ins and outs and the flows of traffic, let alone security, or who's supposed to be on a plane and who isn't supposed to be on a plane, right? This is all tying together if you really look at the similarities, because it's a common denominator: illegals and criminals, right? Illegals was they tried to fight for when it came to the first government shutdown, when SNAP beneficiaries were affected, because they wanted to continue to fund Obamacare, to continue to give free healthcare to illegals, to continue to prop up their voter base to stay in control. That's one. Two, now we see the government shut down. Thank God we got ICE funded till 2029, till Trump's term, due to the spending bill when SNAP was shut down, right? That was the first shutdown. We got it passed where ICE was still funded. Now, the second shutdown that we're seeing right now affecting security when it comes to airports is the same thing involving illegals being able to funnel the airport, because not too long ago, wasn't it a story? That's why President Donald Trump mentioned Ilhan Omar, because of the fraud that was happening in Minnesota with the fake daycares and the fake autism centers. The money was being able to be shipped back to their country because they had boatloads of cash and money that were found in luggages they were taken back to Somalia, right? So if you have security, How are they going to be able to take American taxpayer money based on the fraud that they committed, like, for example, in Minnesota? And that's why you see the coincidence of him, President Trump, mentioning Ilhan Omar. They won't be able to take their money back to their country because they will be checked with security taking place from TSA, right? The money will have to be investigated. Where's all this money going to? Why is it being done this way? Under the system, right? Trying to find a loophole, putting it in packs of luggage. So now it's great that ICE is coming in because, again, once again, we have to stop illegals, let alone criminals, going on airplanes and stuff like that, because that definitely puts our American people and it puts people at risk on a plane, right? In the air. And we can't have that. So I'm saying the common denominator has become to protect illegals and protect criminals, to not only come in and out the country as they want to, putting our aviation safety at risk, but also allowing monies to be shipped back to their country in the name of fraud to be able to basically undergo the loophole of aviation security not being effective because, individuals are leaving, people are finding another job. They can't take it no more, that they're not getting a paycheck. So now that leaves the TSA workers who are still there scrambling and scraping to find the effective areas that they should be. So you mean to tell me you may have TSA workers that are supposed to be at the doors to make sure that the people boarding are supposed to be boarding. You mean to tell me that they may not all be at the doors due to limited amount of TSA workers? Now that you see individuals leaving off the job because they can't take it no more to pay their bills? Don't that open up for a criminal to be able to take their luggage of monies that they committed in the name of fraud in this country and skip town and go to their country so they can not be investigated and not be caught because they're out the country? You get where I'm going here, family? It's all seems as though it's to protect the illegals and continue to basically let the American citizen, American taxpayer, and Americans suffer, right? Rather we're in the air or rather we're within our own country being invaded from criminals. So the common denominator is illegals and criminals. The Democrats party keep protecting and name as using us as a pawn to negotiate on their behalf to continue to use illegals, not only to keep a voter base to stay in control, but also to do kickbacks, right? To keep money flowing for them, because now we can't track if an individual doesn't have a social security and they wasn't supposed to be in this country in the first place, but you could just count bodies and make it look good on paper in the name of the Democrats to continue to funnel monies to where they acting like they're giving it. They're acting like they're doing things for a good cause. But in reality is they're saying we need free healthcare for all, right? Which in AKA means giving it to illegals, while a regular working class American citizen health insurance keeps going up. And then they continue to work with the health insurance companies to continue to give them monies as long as they continue to hush up and allow certain things to happen that the Democrat Party deem acceptable. So you're paying higher health insurance as an American citizen to basically fund an illegal that's not supposed to be here that you don't know about, right? Because they're giving the kickbacks. They're getting the kickbacks because they're acting like free healthcare for all. But if it's free healthcare, Obamacare is supposed to make healthcare affordable. Sorry. Obamacare making healthcare affordable, but is it really making affordable when American citizen health insurance is going up? So why is the health insurance premiums going up? Oh, because if the Democrats work with the health insurance companies, they get money out of it. And then they can also prop up to help the illegals by supplying them with health insurance on the back end, as long as the Democrats keep making sure that the insurance companies is paid. It's all a scheme, right? So I'm saying all of that because illegals and criminals seem to be the common denominator why Americans suffer. So all of this outrage and talking points trying to shut down, tied to this shutdown directly to so-called ICE is misleading at best and dishonest at worst. The people who are actually getting hit right now are folks who have absolutely nothing to do with that political fight. When we're talking about the Coast Guard, TSA, Secret Service, FEMA, these are essential roles and people responsible for disaster response, national security, protecting officials, and keeping transportation systems safe. And they are the ones not getting paid. Let that sink in. The people doing the real day-to-day work that keeps this country functioning are the ones being squeezed while politicians sit comfortably collecting their checks and pushing narratives that don't even line up with reality. And that's why I'm saying this is ridiculous. It's beyond ridiculous at this point. This isn't just a disagreement over policy anymore. This is about real consequences for real people. And the American public deserves to know exactly who is responsible for putting them in position. And people need to understand who is holding things up, who is playing political games, and who is directly contributing to families not being able to pay their bills right now. Because once that information gets to the masses, once people start connecting the dots for themselves, that's when accountability starts to kick in. And that's exactly what needs to happen.
Can I put to you what your fellow Democrat, Senator John Fetterman of Pennsylvania, has said about where things are? He pointed out that the shutdown really is not going to have an impact on ICE, which saw a huge influx of funding from that so-called big, beautiful bill. He said what's really doing, as you pointed out too, is forcing TSA workers to work without pay. FEMA could also be affected. So if ICE reforms are what you want to see here, how does a shutdown that doesn't really affect the agency get you there?
First of all, we have until the end of the month to make sure that TSA agents don't miss a single paycheck, and that is our commitment as Democrats, and we need, of course, Republicans to join us with respect to TSA, along with the Coast Guard and FEMA, the other agencies that are part of the Department of Homeland Security.
Yeah, they miss paychecks. And when you see these politicians get pressed on it, they dance around the question because they know what the real answer is. All Hakeem Jeffries does is word salad. It annoys the heck out of me. They don't want to say it out loud because saying it out loud means admitting responsibility. That's the reality of what we're dealing with right now. And this is exactly why I love to see shows like The View actually address this honestly, especially when you got people like Sonny hosting. Because I've been seeing them real quiet, going on there talking about how the president and folks like Pete Hegseth supposedly don't have a plan when it comes to foreign policy issues like Iran, and Pete Hegseth is incompetent. Well, he seems highly qualified for me and doing a phenomenal job, Pete Hegseth. Okay, so fine, we have that debate. But let's flip that same energy back around. Where is the Democrats' plan when it comes to this shutdown? Because from where I'm sitting, this is no plan. This is no strategy that actually benefits the American people. What we're seeing instead is political leverage at the expense of everyday workers. They effectively allow parts of the government to shut down over a fight tied to ICE funding, even though ICE is already funded for years. So what does that tell you? This isn't about necessity. This isn't about urgency. This is about trying to force an outcome by creating pressure elsewhere. And who absorbs that pressure? Not the politicians, not the people making these decisions, but regular Americans who are now missing paychecks and trying to figure out how they're going to make ends meet. And that's the part that should make people angry. It makes me angry. And that's the part that should be getting called out across every platform. And that's why every time they tell a lie, I just want to tell the truth. Right? I want to let you guys know the truth. So every time they tell a lie, I'm going to get on here and tell the truth. Because at some point, you got to stop pretending this is normal political disagreement and start recognizing for what it is. Reckless decision-making with real consequences. These people need to be exposed. Their actions need to be put under a microscope, and voters need to start paying very close attention to who's actually working in their interests and who is playing games with their livelihood, because that's important.
Mondays, Fridays, and Saturday mornings are always busy here at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. And you look back here, you can see that 120-minute wait posted there, but that's not from this part of the line. That's from the up front part of it. We've already talked to the folks who are right there. They're probably going to miss their flight already. And we've been talking to folks in this line who are preparing themselves and got here early. I want to stop real quick, and I know I talked to you guys a little earlier. Nervous about making your flight? Yes or no at this point?
Yes.
What has this been like?
Hot and just annoying.
I heard the word stressful. What does this feel like standing in this line knowing that you may miss your flight?
Nerves. Like, I'm just nervous and scared, We kind of want to get to where we're going, and it's like we're just waiting. Yeah. We've been stationary for the last 10 minutes, like no movement.
Thank you guys for sharing. Kate, I wanted to stop real quick because this was the end of the line yesterday, and we knew it was really long. We're going to take that walk now and go this way and show you. The line stops here at the end of the atrium, and then we just keep going. Let's not forget yesterday, 38% of the workforce here called out. We're not sure what that will mean today. So you see this line that stretches on for that main checkpoint. This is not where the timer even starts for that 120 minutes. The timer for that starts way back on the other side there. So if you're standing in this part of the line, which snakes around this direction, this is more than 2 hours at this point. Now they're trying to surge in as many workers as they can to help out. But as you see, when we get back to the other part of the airport, they have stacked people all the way around. And this is where it connects to the pre-check line. So you understand the pain point here for so many folks who will miss their flights. And depending on what airlines they are dealing with, some folks will be able to get rebooked. Others will have to kind of figure out if they're going to fly a different day. This is just the beginning of that rush hour. Now that it's slammed like this, it could extend a lot longer.
So now you're seeing the real world impact of all of this. And this is exactly what you would expect when a system starts breaking down. Everybody has to go through the main line now, the main security checkpoint. No exceptions. It doesn't matter if you pay for clear. It doesn't matter if you got TSA pre-checked. All those little conveniences people rely on to move things along. None of that really matters when the system itself is strained. Everybody's getting funneled into the same process. And what does that create? Long lines, slow movement, frustration building up, tempers rising. And you got people standing there in packed airports. Packed airports. It's hot, it's crowded, and it's moving at a snail's pace. And that's a recipe for conflict. And what we're already seeing it. People arguing, people trying to cut in line, almost getting into fights because patience is running thin. And let's be honest, we all know how that goes. When people feel like the system isn't fair or isn't working, they start trying to bend the rules themselves, and that only makes things worse. But then you get to the deeper issue, the part that a lot of folks don't want to talk about. TSA agents don't make a ton of money. On average, you're looking at somewhere between $45,000 and $65,000 a year. And yeah, depending on where they live, they might get some kind of cost of living adjustment. But let's not pretend that suddenly makes everything comfortable. And a lots of parts of this country, that's barely enough to stay afloat as it is. So now imagine being in that position and missing not just one paycheck, but multiple. And if I'm not mistaken, some of these folks have missed up to 3 paychecks at this point. And that's not a small inconvenience. That's rent, that's groceries, gas, taking care of your family. And that's real life. And when you put people in that kind of situation, it's no surprise that performance starts to slip, attendance drops, and morale goes out the window. It's not an excuse, but it is a reality. And again, this all circles back to the same issue. Decisions being made at the top are creating chaos at the ground level. And everyday Americans, including these TSA workers, are the ones being forced to deal with the fallout.
TSA agents holding boxes of donations of food, household supply. One agent, as they were passing us, said, "We're so grateful to our community for being able to support us in this way during a time where they aren't being paid." We also know from TSA that nearly 400 officers have quit their jobs altogether, and it takes about 4 to 6 months to completely train someone in one of these positions. So it's going to be some time before these airports are fully back up and operational. Chris?
Summer travel season will be here before we know it. My Eaglin.
Now, looking at the aftermath of all of this, it even raises more concerns of how this is going to be fixed moving forward. And I would assume that the people who quit it or stop showing up at some point, they may call back or maybe offer some kind of bonuses, maybe back pay, incentives, something to get bodies back in position so the system can function again. But let's be honest, man, this is sad. It's sad. It's unfortunate because it didn't have to get to this point. And what makes it even worse is that now you're starting to see behavior that should not be accepted in the first place, which is this right here, as you guys see on the screen. We're talking about TSA workers being caught on camera stealing money straight out of a passenger's wallet during security checks. Think about how crazy that is. You trust these people with your belongings for a brief moment so you could go through security, and instead you got footage of them unzipping bags and slipping cash into their pockets and acting like nothing happened. And that's not just a lapse in judgment. That's a complete breakdown of professionalism and accountability. So if you're traveling right now, you got to be smart. Keep your cash on, keep your valuables close. Don't casually toss things into bins and assume everything's going to be fine, because clearly right now that trust is being tested. And that's what makes this whole situation even worse. Airports are already stressful enough, and now people have to worry about whether the people screening their bags or running side missions on the job. And it sounds ridiculous, but this is where we are. And look, I hate even having to highlight stuff like this because not every TSA agent is doing this. But when it's happening at all, it's a problem. And the crazy part is these folks have to know there are cameras everywhere. Airports are one of the most surveilled environments you can be in. So now you're risking your job, your record, your future, all for a couple of dollars. It's not worth it. But again, desperate time, desperate measures, right? And this is what happens when you put people under financial strain and create instability in a system that requires consistency and trust. This didn't happen in a vacuum. This is a result of decisions made at the top. And unfortunately, it's the people on the ground, both workers and travelers, who are dealing with the consequences, as you guys can see.
TSA agents holding...
Sorry, family. Let me cue the video up here.
Want the chaos at our airports to come down, yes or no? If you've had enough of long lines, if you want TSA workers to get paid, then vote yes on the motion I am bringing before the Senate today. It is unacceptable for workers and travelers in entire airports to get taken hostage in political games. But that's what the Republicans are doing. It is unacceptable to say we will only pay TSA workers if it is attached to a bill that funds ICE with no reforms. But that's what the Republicans have been doing. Democrats want to pay TSA workers ASAP with no strings attached. A yes vote would do that. That's the first time in this chamber we'll have an opportunity to vote yes or no on whether you want to pay TSA workers ASAP with no strings attached.
And again, it's not just TSA workers dealing with this, and that's what makes this whole situation even more serious. You got FEMA workers, U.S. Secret Service agents, TSA, and members of the U.S. Coast Guard who are not being paid right now. And a lot of people don't realize this, but the Coast Guard isn't under the Department of Defense like the other military branches. They fall under Homeland Security. They are part of DHS, which means they're directly impacted by this shutdown. So now you got people responsible for disaster response, national security, protecting high-level officials, and patrolling our waters, all dealing with financial uncertainty because politicians in Washington want to play games. And that's what this comes down to. This isn't some abstract political disagreement anymore. This is people's lives. This is their ability to pay their bills, take care of their families, and do their jobs effectively. And when you start messing with that, you're not just creating inconvenience, you're creating risk across multiple layers of national security and public safety. And they need to be called out for it, plain and simple. And they should be ashamed of themselves. But the problem is they don't have any shame because for them, it's about getting their way no matter the cost. And that's the pattern we keep seeing over and over again. Whether it's this shutdown or something like the SAVE Act, they refuse to move on because they understand what it means. They understand that if you have secure, transparent elections with clear verification, it changes the landscape politically. And that's why you see resistance. And you look at places like California where you're asking for voter ID isn't even required. And you start connecting the dots. When you look at election outcomes in states that don't require ID, people start asking questions, and rightfully so. At the very least, it raises concerns that deserve to be addressed honestly instead of dismissed outright. But all of this ties back to the same core issue. These decisions are impacting real people in real time, and the American public is the one bearing the burden. So I want to hear from you. What do you think of all of this? What is your thoughts about all of this? Drop your thoughts in the comments below because this is a conversation we need to be having. And if you made it this far, go ahead and hit the like button, share this video with somebody who needs to see it, and subscribe to the channel and turn on your post notifications so you never miss another upload. As always, family, we having a conversation and spread that peace, love, and positivity. Peace. God bless.